Kentucky Senator Rand Paul delivered one of last night's 4 Republican responses to the president. He joins from Capitol Hill. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
So why did the Republicans need 4 responses last night?
Well, you know, if you count them up, we probably had hundreds of responses. I've given a response every year. You know, we live in the age of everybody has access to YouTube, the internet, so we give a response every year. So I didn't really see them as competing. I just saw them as complementary.
What was your biggest complaint about the State of the Union speech?
Well, you know, I think it's not very conciliatory to say, you know, my way or the highway, you either do what I want or I'm going to do it anyway.
But that's not what he's saying, Senator, as you know. I mean, he said, I'd like to cooperate. I'd like to find some common ground. I hope we can do this on these big
Charlie,
issues.
there's a little bit of a subtle threat there, you know, either do it or else. And the thing is there's a bigger question here. It's not just about me being a Republican, the president being a Democrat. This is about the separation of powers. It's about the checks and balances. And it's that democracy's messy. Democracy involves debate, involves going back and forth and trying to convince people on the other side to come your way. And so really saying I've got a pen and a phone, there is a certain amount of arrogance to that.
I looked through your speech last night and I didn't see very many specific policy proposals. However, I didn't notice that you acknowledged that you want to work with anybody, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, to alleviate poverty in this country. What do you think is the cause of poverty?
You know, I did have one specific thing, and it's a big idea, and this is economic freedom zones, and this is proposing lowering taxes in economically depressed areas. For Detroit, it would leave $1.3 billion in Detroit. And the main difference is a pretty big philosophic difference between the president and myself. The president wants to take money from Detroit, bring it to Washington, and then his people will decide who to give it back to. The problem is most businesses fail, so if government picks who they're going to give the money to, most of the time they'll give it to the wrong people. I want to give it back to the people who are earning it. So in Detroit, if there's a successful business, cafe, welding shop, I want to give money back to that business, because if they have 10 employees, they may well get 12 employees if I let them keep more of their taxes. It doesn't work for government to pick the winners because it's hard to know who will be the successful business person.
Can you comment about your recent comments about Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky affair? I know you didn't bring it up. Yes, if you wouldn't mind. I know you didn't bring it up and you were responding to another question. But what difference does that make, and what good comes of that now, 2 decades later? What do you hope will come of that conversation?
Yeah, well, the only reason I'm bringing it up is people keep asking me, and if you ask me a question, I'll most likely answer the question. But what I would say is there's been a lot of talk of a war on women, and I am very concerned that we treat and that women be treated equally and fairly in the workplace. And one of the worst things that can happen is if your boss takes advantage of you in the workplace. And so really, for all these people who stand up for Bill Clinton, say he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, he was a serial philanderer, but he also is someone who took advantage of women in the workplace. And that's an old-fashioned thing from a long time ago. It's only 15 years ago. Many of the Democrats today still defend him and think he's the greatest thing, but he was a person who took advantage of a young girl in the workplace, and I think that's inexcusable, and that kind of war on women should end.
And what do you think that has to do if Hillary Clinton runs for president?
You know, I'm not so sure. I mean, like I said, it's hard to separate them, but it's not her fault. I mean, she's had to tolerate the same sort of problems from him, you know, I guess over time. But I would say that it's more a question of the entire Democrat Party who says there's a war on women and that somehow the other party's committing this, and yet they support and defend a guy who really in the workplace was doing something that was inexcusable, should not be tolerated. And so really there's a question of hypocrisy, and I think people don't like hypocrisy, and so we'll see. I don't know if it makes any difference now or not. I just keep answering the questions y'all ask me.
Let me take one quick point. There was a long profile of you in the New York Times, in which someone quoted about you, said, unlike his father, he's not interested in educating, he's interested in winning. Is that the difference in you and your father?
You know, I don't know. I mean, we're alike in some ways and different in some ways. And, you know, I'm a mixture of my mother, my father, and experience, you know. But, yeah, we're somewhat different in our approach towards things. And I don't know. I always see a concrete, practical answer, like economic freedom zones. I want to say to the people in Detroit, we can help you. Or to the people in Eastern Kentucky, I have a plan. So maybe I'm a little more practically oriented.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Rand Paul.
Thank you.